Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign guide for Prince Imrik of the High Elves in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. I've talked about the changes that patch 3.0 have brought to Imrik's campaign, but let's talk about how you should actually play this campaign. This campaign is probably the hardest campaign of all of the High Elven campaigns. It has a fairly slow start with a fairly limited economy. You'll be on your own, you won't be able to trade with anyone, so your economy is going to be fairly limited. The High Elves do depend a lot on trade, and Imrik not being able to trade with anyone from the start of his campaign is actually going to hurt him quite a bit. On top of that, he starts in the third version of the Thunderdome that Creative Assembly has created over here. Why do I say that? Well, you have Drazov to the north, you have Tretch over here to the northwest, you have Gorse to the east, you have Greases over here to the east as well. You have Queek to the west, as well as Wurzak to the far west as well. And also Skarsnik, just for good measure. So you have a lot of enemies. Now, these factions have one thing in common. The aversion they feel towards you is very significant. Like, the Castors have a minus 60 aversion, the Greenskins have minus 100, the Ogres have minus 25, Skaven have minus 100 as well. Though, interestingly enough, Clan Carrion over here actually appreciates the fact that I wiped Clan Helheim. But interesting or not. Regardless though, you are going to be in for a rough start. Let's take it from the very first steps over here. You do have a Dwarven army over here of Clan Helheim. And they have two settlements in Bone Gulch and Ash Ridge Mountain. The army here is the only army Clan Helheim has. If you wipe this out, take the Bone Gulch and then take Ash Ridge Mountain, they will recruit a lord, but they won't recruit any more troops. So what you're interested in is taking the settlement. Now, here's what's important to do when you're taking over the settlement. Loot and occupy. Don't sack it, don't just occupy it, loot and occupy. The reason is, you want a rebellion. Yes, this campaign is so brutal that you're actually going to trigger a rebellion deliberately in order to fight that rebellion and get the gold and, crucially, the influence that you're going to need in your campaign. That's where the fun begins. So either way, you take the Ash Ridge Mountains. The next turn after, you might need to move Imrik outside of the Ash Ridge Mountain to trigger it. Like, for instance, here, if I move him inside, it won't trigger, but if I move him just outside of it, after winning that battle, it will trigger. And I've looted and occupied both of these settlements. Obviously, there are consequences for doing that, but it's worth paying those consequences. Now, in the Fortress of Vorag, you should be recruiting archers with light armor, and also getting a second army, either on turn 1 or, more really, on turn 2, just to get some units, because Imrik on turn 2, after turn 2, should end like in this territory, but he's not going to be able to recruit there. But you still want to keep moving with him towards the Ash Ridge Mountains to be able to take them. So recruiting a second army to keep the recruitment going is an important thing. You also want to get the Elven Gardens to get a noble. Now the problem is you won't have any influence for a good noble, but this is where I would say it's pretty vital if you're playing an Imrik campaign to play another High Elven campaign in the first place, and recruit a noble that's good, and then save that character at level 1. Not at the high level, though you can do so as well, but at level 1, and then load it in Imrik's campaign once he gets hero recruitment up. And also with lords as well. For instance, this lord, like if I look at recruiting a lord, I have a bunch of them available, princes, and this particular prince has a particularly good passive trait that gives him 250 unit experience per turn and 20% ammunition. You can consider this a cheese. I personally don't. Creative Assembly knew what they were doing with this mechanic. You can play without it, but keep in mind it will be harsher if you do so. I would recommend, if you want to get lords or nobles with good stats, lords in particular, you can play Elfarian's campaign if you have it, for a couple of turns, or just play any High Elven campaign, and naturally you'll get influence and get good lords, good heroes. At least one good, one of each type will help you out a great deal. Now I have a noble over here saved that gives you 5% extra campaign movement range to accompanying lord and 20% ammunition, and I'm most certainly going to make use of that. Once you recruit your first noble, either loading and saving or just accepting that you're going to recruit one with a bad stat, what you do is you get rid of the Elven Gardens. You won't need them after this particular point. You need the income from that settlement, and you'll be able to recruit nobles through Imrik's special skill line at rank 12 anyway. Now, you could take the view, well, if you're not loading or saving, if you're not saving and loading a character, you could take the view that, well, I don't want the Elven Gardens, because I'm going to be able to get noble recruitment anyway from Imrik, and so what's the point? Let's just go for income. That is a reasonable view. I prefer getting a noble as quickly as possible, and yes, I do prefer using the save load system. Keep recruiting archers with light armor, but once you take over this entire province, enable local recruitment capacity. Now that's the easy part, and in the Bone Gulch you should get the Graves of the Dragons. Once the Fortress of Voreg is at tier 3, you should get the Tower of the Bloody Tooth. Also, on turn 1, you should invoke Asuryan for a 15% construction cost. Post-battle wise, you should go for money and influence. You want the construction cost, you want the influence as well. This will give you 10 influence in total, with also the influence you're going to gain from the initial battle you're going to fight on the field, as well as the influence that you're going to gain over here from the rebellion. You should have a decent amount of influence, and hopefully by the time you confederate Calador, you should be able to have enough influence to be able to go for the Confederation event that allows you to also get good diplomatic relations with the High Elves. Don't allow Calador to maintain its independence. The reason you don't want to do so is because you need trade. And if you let Calador maintain their independence, you're not going to get that. What's going to happen over here is Noctilus is going to try and wipe them out, but he won't necessarily succeed so easily. Or he might. It is looking a bit dicey in this particular situation, but it's 13 units versus 13 units, and the garrison has a significant advantage, and High Elves do better in Out-Resolve. So, Creative Assembly have stated in their patch notes that they've given these kind of minor factions a boost, and it does seem to me that on any difficulty I play, including Legendary, very hard, on which I've played this so far, that Calador is not going to be wiped out so easily. So you have some time. Before, there was this mad rush in Imrik's campaign to get the Confederation going as quickly as possible, because otherwise Calador would be taken, and you wouldn't really have many opportunities to be able to trade with Ulthuan. Yes, you do have a quest battle that you get and will give you vision in this particular area. The problem with that is that you need to wait for Alariel to take this territory in the first place, which can take a while. So you might have to put off doing your quest battle. You can win it with a pretty early game army if you just get archers with light armor, rangers potentially for some melee damage, and of course spearmen, as well as your starting units. Now, once you've taken over your initial province, you've sorted everything that I just mentioned out, you're going to get a rebellion, you're building up income over here, and you're trying to expand further. What should you do? Well, here are some of the things to know. The Thunderguts here are going to declare war on you. It is inevitable. Because, one, they dislike you, two, you're vulnerable. So you should try and wipe them out as quickly as possible in your campaign. If you go north against Razov, Tretch is also going to declare war on you. You don't have direct vision with Tretch. So until you take over specifically the Darkhold or the Sentinels, you won't have vision with Tretch. That means that maybe the best expansion path against Razov would be to take the Black Fortress. But first you need to deal with the Thunderguts. The problem with that is Gorst. Gorst is not going to like you in general. He does have a fairly high aversion against you. And he won't like you for wiping out the Thunderguts. So how do you avoid a war with Gorst? Well, you could just go into this particular province in the Scalded Delta. Wait to see what happens with Razov, because Razov might very likely end up at war with Tretch. That would be the most ideal scenario for you, because it would allow you to deal with everything here, and take this province and sell it to Gorst. Or, take this province, start building it up, wipe out Gorst. Your army is far stronger than his. You're one of the few people that can actually take down Gorst and just sneeze at him, and he will collapse. Like zombies, because Gorst's zombie benefits, they're all melee benefits. Well, those melee benefits aren't going to matter for squat when your archers are just raining down death from above. Be concerned about dealing with Gorst. He's a lot tougher than I'm making him out to be. But if you move against him with strong decisive force, you should be able to wipe him out. And then you can sell the territory to Greases. And selling the territory to Greases will give you good relations with Greases. Thing is, Greases is likely going to be wiped out by a combination of factors. For whatever reason, he ends up at war with... usually, I've seen him end up at war with the Western provinces, with Gorst and with Grimgor, and that's a lovely scenario. So it might be a good idea to actually try and ally Gorst, even though there is a significant diplomatic downside to obviously trying to achieve that. The aversion is fairly strong between High Elves and vampires. But it doesn't need to be a permanent alliance. It can be a temporary alliance. You just want someone over here to gain control of this territory. So you can either take the Scalded Delta and move against Gorst yourself, or you can take the Scalded Delta, sell it to Gorst, and then move on Drazov. Now, if Drazov declares war on you, he's not going to have the easiest time to actually assault you. He might take the Ash Ridge Mountain, sure, but he likely will try and march his army through this particular gap towards the Fortress of Vorag. So if your army is over here, you can intercept them. You can also get a second army to keep recruiting units over here. You should be able to maintain enough money to continue your unit recruitment as you're moving to deal with ogres, especially if you're sacking their settlements or you're choosing the gold post-battle option. That's, by the way, why it's important to get this rebellion early on, because it will give you quite a bit of gold and also influence. Now, doing this, you won't gain. You will only gain 2 counts towards the return of the prince. You can cheese this, by the way. The way you cheese it is you send the lord, you occupy Better Bay. That will give you 1. You can also just have a lord following your main army, and what you do one turn is you sack the settlement with Imrik's army, and then you occupy it next turn. You wait for an end turn. You take it slow. You sack it once with Imrik. You press the end turn button. Next turn garrison replenishes a bit. You then send your second lord to occupy it, and Imrik army support, and Imrik's army just moves on. That's one of the ways of dealing with that. Or you could just try and advance and expand as quickly as possible. Now, once you end up at war with Drazov, be concerned about Tretch and what he's going to do. And also be concerned about the Mega Mortar that's over here in the Black Fortress. It is something you can dodge. My advice would be, don't clump up your units, because if you clump up your units, he's going to target them. And pay attention to what's going on in a battle. It can be annoying when you're having to micromanage everything else to pay attention for that, but bear in mind, he's only got limited uses to this Mega Mortar. So once he uses it twice, he's not going to be able to use it again. And there is a decent cooldown on this ability, like of 90 seconds. So you have like 90 seconds before he uses it again, and you can dodge the ability completely when he's trying to use it. It actually has a fairly significant wind-up time, so it is an ability that you can dodge. That's how the AI dodges it. So annoying, really. It's tricky to use it as Drazov, but if it hits, make no mistake, if it hits on a clump of units, it's going to wipe all of those units out or bring them to less than half HP. You might also want to sacrifice a particular unit to take the full damage of this, just so you're not having to deal with it. Now, once you've wiped out Drazov, and maybe your best way of wiping out Drazov is take the Black Fortress first, take the Sentinels, and then take the Darkhold. Now, to talk about Drazov's army over here, yes, he's going to have Kadai Fireborn, but the thing about Kadai Fireborn is while they're a very powerful unit, massive archers are going to take them down very, very quickly. Fireglaves are good units, but massive archer will kill those quickly because they don't have a silver shield. So basically, you're going to be dealing with some Castdorf warriors that are going to be a bit of a challenge because they're fairly resistant, and you're also going to be dealing with a lot of laborers. That's what Drazov usually recruits. Like, if we look at a situation right here, He's gaining the recruitment for Cast Dwarf Warriors and Infernal Castellan, and he's getting a garrison over here. He's not getting the Hobgoblin mustering camp. Now, he may get that Hobgoblin master camp, especially in the Darkhold, but he's not going to do it so quickly. Now, if he brings Hobgoblins, it doesn't matter. Your archers, spearmen, rangers are just flat out better than everything he has in his arsenal, with the exception of the Cast Dwarf warrior units themselves. Be aware of the blunderbusses and fireglaves, though. They can do a lot of damage if they hit, but you can run in circles around them. You have a dragon. You have dragon princes, and once you get Imrik on a dragon, it's kind of GG. Once you get Imrik on a dragon, he can might as well solo armies. Then you move over here, and you deal with Trench. You should engage diplomatically with the dwarves. They're going to be wiped out. Don't help Karakazul against Queek. Take out Queek once he's taken over this entire province. Then move on, then move to the west. But you should also take control of the Desolation of Asgore. If you want a really hardcore challenge, you can move to the north. You're probably going to inevitably meet him anyway, and deal with Grimgor. Grimgor is going to be a fairly interesting one. Then you also have the dragon encounters. Which dragon you decide to fight, and which dragon you just decide to take a buff from. Like, your second dragon should always be something you fight, but your first dragon you might just want to gain a buff from it, or influence, dependent on what it's offering, depending on which dragon you're getting. If it's an easy dragon, I think the one that is basically a super duper sun dragon, you can just simply go for the Baal. It does have a Tomb King's army, but you can defeat that. If it's the Black Dragon or something along those lines, it is a lot harsher to deal with. But if you can get one of these powerful dragons early on in your campaign, you're going to gain a significant amount of power, which you're going to need to deal with the dumb green brute over here and everything else in your campaign. Your victory conditions require you to deal with Rictus and Kugaf. Your long campaign victory conditions require you to deal with Quake, Wurzag, and Khorne, and also encounter 5 legendary dragons. That's what you need to do. So you don't have to interact with Ulthuan. But speaking about Ulthuan, just to mention this before I end the video, just to go over there actually. Speaking about Ulthuan, when you confederate Kalador, it might have a decent army in its own right, and if you're willing to spend the money on it, you can actually take some territory. Maybe, like Noctilus will usually take Torsify, or he'll rebuild it after he raises it to the ground, or Kalador will rebuild it. You can obviously sell these territories to Tyrion to get diplomatic relations, including all the way to defensive alliance. But here's the thing you can do. You can keep all your regiments from Renown Reserve. I also think you can recruit the dragon in any particular army, the special dragon. So what you can do, once you confederate Kalador, is your second army might be able to beat Noctilus. Or it will be able to beat Noctilus' secondary or tertiary armies. And as a result of that, you can actually take a lot of this territory back that Noctilus will take in the first place. Because he will take a lot of Terranok, if not all of Terranok. Though, of course, the concern is he might take Val's Anvil very quickly. And you just move an army over here, taking as much territory as you can, maybe building a full stack, if you have the money for it. Bear in mind, the Black Fortress is still a major site of caravans, so while it will piss off Cathay, actually raiding those caravans will give you the money you need. And if you can take a significant portion of Ulthuan, then you can actually end up confederating Alariel and Tyrion and Elfarion in your campaign. I've done it. It was pretty brutal. And I did it before patch 3.0 specifically. Because Noctilus' army is much weaker than your army. Nakari is a very different discussion. You should be concerned about that. But if you can remove the threat of Noctilus, and also, as you're taking territory here, you shouldn't hold it to develop it yourself. You should sell it to Tyrion. And as you're taking territory, getting a military alliance with Tyrion, when you do declare war on Nakari, you should be, Tyrion should also join in, Elfarion should join in, Alariel should join in, and once that's done, like, Nakari can't stand up to the full might of Alariel, Elfarion, and Tyrion in his campaign. And if you take a lot of this territory for yourself, and obviously trading it as you go, eventually you will get a confederation option with some of the High Elven factions, be it Alariel, or Tyrian, or Elfarian, as you encounter them. And obviously controlling all of Ulthuan and controlling those legendary lords is a significant benefit in your campaign. That's all there is to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications.